What's up, Taiwan? I'm Leslie Liao with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the UK's position on Taiwan has not changed. Here he is speaking about Indo-Pacific security in an interview with Sky News.
Our position on Taiwan is long-standing and hasn't changed. And actually, we share with Japan a belief in a free and open Indo-Pacific region. That's very important. And we're increasing our engagement in the region to work with allies like Australia, like Japan, to ensure that the Pacific region does remain free and open. We don't want to see any change to the status quo by force or coercion.
The Prime Minister was speaking from a Japanese naval base ahead of the G7 summit in Hiroshima. Sunak and Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio on Thursday unveiled the Hiroshima Accord, pledging closer security cooperation. The UK also says it will deploy an aircraft carrier strike group to the region by 2025. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky will attend the G7 summit in Japan in person. That's according to an unnamed European Union source. The announcement came as the G7 leaders began the summit with a visit to Hiroshima's Peace Memorial Park. They laid wreaths to remember the dead and the devastation of the Allied atomic bombing of the city in World War II. Nuclear disarmament is high on the agenda for the summit, as neighboring China and North Korea are both advancing their nuclear weapons programs. The visit to Hiroshima's Peace Memorial comes as fears over China's nuclear ambitions continue to grow. James Chater has this report from Japan.
I tend to believe that the Chinese nuclear buildup is a result of both fear and ambition.
All of the nuclear weapon states are currently developing more modern, newer kinds of weapons. But only China, among the 5 official nuclear weapon states, is actually increasing the numbers of weapons that it has.
3 of the 5 nuclear states, France, the UK and the US, are G7 members, a group of 7 of the world's most advanced economies. This year, the group's leaders are gathering here in Hiroshima, where the US used atomic weapons for the first time in history, bringing about the end of World War II. In Hiroshima, G7 leaders are discussing rapidly expanding nuclear arsenals in Asia, and particularly China's, at a time of increasing tensions in the region. For decades, China's number of nuclear warheads held steady at around 200, but in recent years it's grown rapidly. The Federation of American Scientists now estimates Beijing has at least 410 nuclear warheads. A Pentagon report last year said that China will have 1,500 warheads by 2035. If its arsenal keeps expanding at its current rate. Beijing described that US report as speculation. Many think China's military modernization has one aim, to take Taiwan, which Beijing claims as part of its territory. But its rapid nuclear buildup could alter the security dynamic if China ever makes good on that promise.
Some believe that China is developing a force comparable to that of the United States and Russia, perhaps to deter the US from aiding in the defense of Taiwan.
But experts say China's nuclear buildup could lock the 2 superpowers in an escalatory cycle, especially if tensions over Taiwan spike.
And it believes that the only way to change the American and Western thinking is to, build stronger capability and to change the balance of power in greater favor to China. Both sides are increasingly convinced. The other side wants to go nuclear first. So that's how this dynamic is increasingly dangerous.
Some experts say China believes its military prowess now surpasses the US in the Western Pacific, and that would lead to Washington threatening nuclear force first in a potential conflict. Washington believes that China building its own nuclear arsenal means it could do the same. China is starting a new nuclear reactor in Changbiao, just over 200 kilometers from Taiwan. The facility will enrich plutonium that could be used in nuclear warheads. China now has at least 3 missile silos located deep within the country's territory. From there, intercontinental ballistic missiles could strike anywhere on US territory. Experts say neither side wants to use nuclear weapons, but they add an atmosphere of distrust, and little communication between the US and China is heightening the risk of miscalculation.
The biggest risk factor is uncertainty. It's not known to what degree China is building up its nuclear forces. So all it's known is that the buildup is occurring.
My greatest concern is the lack of transparency is causing worst-case scenario thinking. So the damage is already being done and it's becoming greater over time.
Adding to the concerns are Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its threats of nuclear force. That's stoking fears that China may draw lessons from Moscow's actions and threaten to use its rapidly expanding arsenal in a future conflict. Andy Schuer, Alex Chen and James Chater in Hiroshima, Japan for TaiwanPlus.
For more on the G7 summit and how its members are looking to collaborate to face security issues, our reporter Jaime Okan spoke to Washington, D.C.-based security analyst Nishimura Rintaro.
The G7 has traditionally been a space for economic cooperation, but what about security cooperation? What have we seen so far coming out of G7?
The Japanese government came out with a document about the priorities for the G7 summit, and there's two areas in particular that I think we should know. One is obviously the big one, which is maintaining the international order based on the rule of law. And the other one is reinforcing engagement with the so-called global south. And I think the first one in particular includes like opposing unilateral changes to the status quo by force. But I think the emphasis this time is that it's anywhere in the world. So it's not just about Russia and Ukraine, but it's also alluding to China and Taiwan. And it's also going to focus obviously on the Russia's threat of use of nuclear weapons, which again is a big topic given the current situation. And in terms of the Indo-Pacific, I think the G7 foreign ministers meeting in April showed that this is going to be a focus going forward.
And what about the influence of a collective threat from China and Russia?
Focus so far has been on Russia, obviously, because of the situation in Ukraine. But I think you'll see in the previous leaders' summits and also the foreign ministers meeting that there's a lot of focus on China recently. As you said, it's because they're both challenging what we would call the existing international order. So I think the focus there will be obviously to impose more severe sanctions, but also to make sure that third parties cannot kind of help Russia evade those sanctions.
Recently, we saw plans for NATO to open a liaison office in Japan, and we're seeing more European nations be more engaged in the Indo-Pacific. Is this a trend? Are we going to see more of this?
While there are questions about European countries, like what they can actually contribute given the geographic distance with Asia and the resource constraints that each country faces, I think it's a welcome trend that they're also trying to get involved in the Indo-Pacific since, countering China is not something that can be done by a country on its own. And I think the point to stress here is that there's a growing understanding that the security of the Euro-Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific is closely connected or inextricably linked. NATO's 2022 strategic concept states that the Indo-Pacific is an important region and that it wants to strengthen dialogue and cooperation with new and existing partners.
That was Nishimura Rintaro, a security analyst based in Washington, D.C., speaking with TaiwanPlus reporter Jaime Okan. President Tsai has met with former British Prime Minister Liz Truss in Taipei. Truss arrived in Taiwan on Tuesday. She's the first former British leader to visit the country since Margaret Thatcher made the trip in the 1990s. President Tsai thanked Truss for her vocal support of Taiwan and for stressing the importance of regional peace and stability. Truss praised Tsai for her achievements as Taiwan's president and her leadership in the face of intimidation from Beijing.
And it's even more impressive that you have managed to achieve this under your brave leadership, despite the fact that there has been intimidating efforts by the People's Republic of China.
Taiwan will not be invited to attend the annual World Health Assembly, or WHA, this year. It's the 7th consecutive year Taiwan has been left out of the meeting. Taiwan's government had hoped to participate as an observer at the assembly, which will be held on May 20th in Geneva, Switzerland. But it is consistently excluded due to China's objections. However, there is growing support among Taiwan's diplomatic allies and other friendly countries for Taiwan to join the annual meeting. That includes from Japan, the UK, Canada, and the US. Foreign Minister Joseph Wu says Taiwan will keep fighting for a spot at the WHA.
那中国一再在国际社会上面声称说代表我们台湾，那这个是说不过去的，我们台湾人民也不会接受。那我在这边要再一次重申，只有台湾民选的政府 能够在国际组织里面代表我们台湾人民。
Taiwan and the U.S. have finished negotiating the first part of a major trade pact. On Thursday, U.S. Trade Representative Tsai announced the update to the US-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade. The initial agreement will cover terms related to customs and trade facilitation, good regulatory practices, and regulation of services. Other areas include anti-corruption and small and medium-sized enterprises. The pact is expected to strengthen economic ties between the two countries, but it is not likely to include tariff reductions on goods, meaning it will still fall short of Taiwan's long-term goal of signing a bilateral free trade agreement with the U.S. A construction company whose crane caused a fatal metro accident in the central city of Taichung has been fined more than $450,000 by the Labor Ministry. Last week, a crane owned by High Wealth Construction fell 31 stories onto a metro track. An oncoming train hit the object, killing one person and injuring 10. Legislators pointed out that the construction firm had been ordered to suspend work 56 times within a 5-year period. Many are now calling for stricter penalties for repeat offenders. Taiwan's Ministry of Labor says those who frequently violate safety regulations could be put on a blacklist.
就是公布了哈，那另外就是跟内政部营建署这边来报告哈，透过公共工程委员会是不是列入这个不良名单。
A group of scientists in the U.S. are developing drones using the feathers of dead birds. It's part of a research that's working to better understand the aerodynamics of birds for future aircraft development. Jaime Ocon has more.
At first glance, this might seem like a bird, but it's actually a drone, one that's covered in bird feathers. A team of engineers in the U.S. state of New Mexico are using the feathers of taxidermied birds to develop new aircraft and drone technology.
If we learn how these birds, they manage the energy between themselves, we can apply them into the future aviation industry to save more energy and save more fuel, and which will be more economics in the future in aviation industry.
The project is led by Mustafa Hassanalian, a professor of mechanical engineering. He says that during his research, it was nearly impossible to develop drones that could replicate the flight efficiency of a real bird. That's when he decided to use bird feathers to help drones stay in the air, as real feathers have some of the most efficient aerodynamics around.
And the only thing that we need to provide them to make them alive is to basically design an actuation mechanism, put in their body, and everything is there. So they have their tail, they have their wings, they have their head, the body, everything is there.
By studying how the different parts of a bird work when it's in flight, the engineers were able to take the results and apply them in their research. They've already seen improvements in energy conservation and say the project's applications could apply to a variety of sectors.
So we cannot deny, this is a new research that we have introduced to the research communities. We cannot deny the application of this for other types of military types of application, but what we have been focused is mainly civil application and specifically to understand the wildlife or monitor the birds.
The project will continue for the next 2 years. The next phase is to increase the amount of time the drones are in the air and hopefully take their development to new heights. John Su and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
Several precious antiques have been found in Taiwan's eastern Hualien County. The historical pieces were uncovered by the site's private landowners by chance during a renovation project. Items found include beads and copper coins from the Song Dynasty, a period of Chinese imperial rule that lasted from the 10th to 13th centuries. The landowners have given the county's Culture Bureau temporary rights to dig further and see if other items remain. Experts say the historical finds suggest that maritime trade flourished during the time of their creation.
考古学者呢就推论，这个可能在当时呢就是有很丰富的一个海上贸易的一个交流。
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Finally today, we leave you with images of British traveler Adventure Man's record-breaking trip through 7 world wonders in just 7 days. I'm Liao. Take care and see you next time.